7 o'clock. It is the 27th of January 2020. This is the Jamaica Selectboard meeting. And first order of business is to call for any additions to the agenda. Did I say hand quote?
We're going to talk about technology and potentially allocating some money for technology upgrades.
Alrighty. Anything else? Hearing none. Next item of business, approve the minutes for the January 13th Select Board. Minutes. There we go. They were sent around electronically, plus everybody should have a copy. If you'd like, we can get you another copy. Everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes. And any corrections, deletions, additions?
I'll make a motion to pass to the meeting minutes as written.
Second. I have one. Is there any discussion? Yes, I do have one item. Actually, I have two little items. Can you, let's talk about number 5. In the last line, it says Judy made a motion to approve the request to make improvements to Town Trail number 8. That motion, I believe, was to approve the request to make improvements to Town Trail number 8 pending the signed agreement. If you recall, there's an agreement that needs to be signed before we go forward with it. Remember that?
Yeah.
So is it okay to amend that item?
Yes.
Okay, and the only other item is on the top of the second page, Andre Ansedin Allen. I think it starts out on the previous page. Joel met with Andre and told us she is willing to help with coordinating. This isn't a correction, it's just a question. Andre is from where? Who is she and how does she connect to this?
I have the card right here.
Her link's right there too.
Joel.
Where?
From,
Is that, I mean, I don't know who she is or what she
I
is.
can't remember.
she's from Brattleboro, USDA.
USDA.
You see the USDA officer in Brattleboro?
Yes.
Okay, so let's put in from the USDA office in Brattleboro.
I'll amend the motion to accept the meeting minutes as revised.
Second. Have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll abstain.
Abstain?
I'm abstaining because I was named.
All right, one abstention. They pass. Thank you very much. The next item of business is our usual, approve the minutes, identify the timesheets for town office, solicitors, highway, transportation, and number 4, so that sign the select board orders. We will do that at the end of the meeting to preserve the time of our guests. Just be aware, we're going to have Kelly Pajala as representative is going to be coming in, but she wasn't sure about what time. So I put her as number 6, but we're not sure exactly when she's going to be here. So right off the bat, though, we're going to be hearing about the state broadband initiative. When did you go to that meeting?
The 16th was the kickoff meeting.
Okay. I couldn't remember the date. When I put it in.
Is she part of that?
No, Kelly's separate.
Okay.
She's coming.
interested in it.
She's
That's what I
she's
thought.
coming in as her own.
It sounded like she was connected.
She's interested in doing it, she's been at the meetings.
Yeah. So, Mr. Robbins, if you'll identify yourself to the camera, you have the floor.
Well, thank you. The broadband initiative goal is to build and operate a FTTP or fiber to the premises network in underserved or unserved areas of the state. These FTT nets will serve communication union districts, which are to be formed from 2 or more towns. They'll be built and operated by a business entity. It can either be a nonprofit or a for-profit business. And the first phase of this, which is what I'll pitch tonight, is a study, and the basic study is to build a business case for developing the networks. And I should point out that this is an opportunity to fulfill policy number 4 and number 7 in the infrastructure section of our town plan, which calls on investigating ways to expand broadband coverage for the whole town.
Good.
And if it works, we will have taken action in accordance with action item number 6 and 7. The Wyndham Regional Council is prime, well, it's a contractor, but I guess that's as close as any, for the study. They have 2 partners, which are Rural Innovation Strategies, Inc., which is the business planner, essentially, and ValleyNet, which is an engineering firm which will design the system comparable to, I guess, a preliminary engineering report with sufficient detail to support a funding initiative. The study runs from its kickoff meeting on the 16th to August of 2020. It's a very compressed schedule.
I noticed that on the slides, it's not a lot of time.
Yeah. The Wyndham Regional Commission is, everybody knows what that is, I guess. I just want to point out that it has 27 towns and 3 counties, and because of the large number, that's why they want a single rep to be appointed by each town. They just can't deal with everybody.
Gotcha.
Rural Innovation Strategies, Inc. is a sister organization of the Center for Rural Innovation. Their goal is to spread the digital economy into rural areas. And their basic responsibility is to develop the business case for capitalization of these fiber networks, which include defining the communication union district or the market, an engineering design to support the development costs, and operating budget sufficient to determine what the return on investment would be for potential investors. ValleyNet is, as I said, is an engineering firm which will design and possibly operate the system. They have designed and built one up north in east central Vermont, and they're currently working on a second one.
Is there, I don't want to interrupt you, but how many of them are in progress in Vermont right now? Just the
Just
first
the
one?
2.
Just the 2? Okay.
That I know of. The ultimate goal of this is to build a business plan and feasibility study or a business case which will be sufficient to support development either from revenue bonds, grants, private investment, or a combination of all 3 necessary to capitalize building the network. The elements of this feasibility study, first and foremost, are a take rate survey. This is a survey of how many people will sign up initially. They need to get 30%. These are basically the early adopters and they figure if they get 30% up front, then another 30% will follow once the networks.
Now you're talking 30% of the community or 30% of the whole the whole communication district?
They weren't clear, but they mean 30% of the town, I think, right now.
Okay.
I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but
Sorry.
this is kind of a challenge for us because of the disproportionate number of vacation homeowners.
Yeah.
They need to know the location by home, and they need to know how much bandwidth individual homeowners would want. You can have up to 100 megabits per second, is what they cite in this presentation, but I'm pretty sure I heard a gigahertz at the meeting, so that's an issue.
Over fiber, you could definitely get that.
Huh?
Eventually, you could get that over fiber. It's all based on the equipment that's being that.
Yes, yeah, the fiber will support it, so.
Yeah.
But there's a conflict between what they said and what's in here. They need to know what the customers' potential customers would be willing to pay, and they need what they call a vertical asset inventory, which means how many telephone poles. They're gonna string these on existing poles, so if you have a connection to the electrical grid, a utility pole you're connected to, you can be connected to this.
Would they be using the power poles or the telephone poles?
It didn't say.
Actually, I can speak for my road, most of our lines are on telephone poles
Yeah.
because it's cheaper to go telephone pole and have the electricity connected.
I would, now that you mentioned it, I think they must mean telephone poles because they intend to connect to backbone providers, either consolidated dish network, somebody with the high bandwidth capacity, and be a reseller of bandwidth for those firms. So in our case, I can't imagine they wouldn't follow the telephone poles for
Right.
consolidated.
You know, we found that out 35 years ago when we moved here, that to put up an electrical pole would cost over $1,000. To put up a telephone pole, we had telephone before we had electricity, and that was free.
Well, they don't want to put up any poles. So. Well, they said they made some exceptions maybe, but basically they're going to follow the existing utility pole routes. All of that is to develop routes and methods, or basically the network topology, identify communication union districts where there's a critical mass, and with that information they can come up with a technical design for a preliminary engineering study and costing. The business plan will include the high-level engineering and design plans, the market analysis, financing models, and as I said, these can be revenue bonds, grants, or capital investment. What they cannot be is municipal bonds, tax money, town doesn't pay. The estimated cost construction and the operation model will be included too. These communication union districts are basically the same as any other municipal district. If you saw that slide, there were several examples of a health district, a water district, a solid waste district, and a regional offices district. They don't necessarily have to be contiguous, and it's possible to have multiple connections to a network. The fact that we have consolidated running through the middle of town shouldn't really be a problem for galvanizing on either side of Route 30. Why? Basically, they want to make the communication union districts as big as possible to aggregate as much demand as possible to make the investment as attractive as possible. And that's basically what all that slide says. They will have to be big enough, this is my aside, to generate a return on investment. Even if it's a nonprofit, they have to have an operating profit or else they'll fold. So they're going to have to generate enough income to return the capital investment and operate the network. There can be, as I said, there must be at least two, but the ones that they illustrated had on the order of 15 in them. So
15 towns?
Towns, yeah. So they're looking to make them pretty big. The town boundaries are irrelevant. Well, you've got to get along with your neighbors too. Again, the cost to the taxpayer in the town is zero. The town is not on the hook for anything. And if it goes belly up, we're still not on the hook. Although the assets of whatever entity is can be seized if there's bankruptcy proceedings. There's two ways to join. Either we can vote to join at the town meeting, and this is from an initial communication unit district is formed, or after one is formed, the select board can choose to join it by the select board. They gave sample language of a resolution here, and I won't belabor that, but should we join, we can, copy this and be perfectly. So, the first thing, here's what we have to do. The first thing to do is for the select board to decide if you want to participate. And if you do, you have to pass a simple resolution to say so. You have to designate an official point of contact, which means you can either confirm me or appoint somebody else. And again, I'll say again, my feelings won't be hurt if somebody on the select board wants to be the rep instead of me. It's okay, but somebody. And then after you do that, you have to inform Sue West at the WRC. The next step is a tutorial on February 6th on how to conduct the survey. No, there's only one official rep. It's an open meeting, so anybody that's interested can go. This take rate survey underpins the whole thing, really. And we have nearly 3/4 of the grand list is vacation property. The number of buildings is probably less because there's some pretty palatial vacation homes making up the grand list, but still, they predominate the number of buildings in our town. So it seems to me, given our past response to surveys, that we're going to have to get a response from the non-resident property owners to get a 30% take rate, which means mailing, which means money. The WRC will create the survey cards and with their partners, they'll write all the questions. We don't have to do any of that. They will. They kind of danced around the issue of what if somebody wants it but can't really afford it. They said they'll have some questions in there addressing that, but they really didn't say what they were going to be yet. And they will provide assistance with dissemination, but basically I think we're going to have to do it if we want to pursue it. Time is of the essence. I may be speaking a little out of turn, but I know it's the end of the budget year, so if there's no money for the mailing, there is money in the JPC's fund that could be used, and it's legal free to spend it. So if that's attractive, I'll bring it up at the next planning commission meeting.
Just a quick question. Do you remember what it cost us for our last mailing?
I don't pay the bills.
Not the bill, but top, did we send a mailing out?
We had done one for when we announced the meeting for the water
Yeah.
presentation, and that was, obviously was only a postcard as opposed to a large
Right.
survey, but it was only $200.
That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
Around 5, it's that,
Yeah.
more than that.
I mean, I think the postage was 200 and maybe the printing was 80 or something like that. I mean, it was
300.
pretty nominal,
Yeah.
really.
So we can take a guess around $300 or $400.
What about,
Might even be high.
Well,
the town meeting's coming up, bringing it to town meeting, having cards at town meeting, having,
Yeah.
telling people, hey, we really need you to fill out these surveys. Granted, it's not gonna be 30% at town meeting, but that's gonna take a chunk. And throw some at Karen's store, have her,
I think it's gonna take a
So-
multi-pronged effort.
Yeah.
And if someone stayed at the transfer station for a day.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's
yeah.
a lot of things, so we're still, like Chris was saying, we still need to reach those people who aren't here all the time. Because they are very likely that they would want this service to their house, even for the 1 week a month they're here or
Oh,
something.
sure, absolutely, but I'm concerned about having them available for the public to grab and fill out, in that there's going to have to be some way to maintain some discipline about what properties are represented, as opposed to picking up a handful of cards that Karen's filling them all out. And so granted, we can go by addresses, but I'm wondering if we're going to hit all the properties or get a whole lot of cards for a couple of properties. I'm just thinking about the discipline of maintaining a legitimate 30%.
I think that's where we need to do the mailing and 3 or 4 other things. And I'm gonna guess, I mean, the planning group that's involved is gonna be doing the tallying of the survey, and the planning of the creation of the survey is still to take place, that there's probably some mechanism there to make sure that somebody's not filling out one twice and somebody's not getting missed, and what properties are we.
I'm sure it's manageable. It's just one of those things I'm thinking of is of how to make sure we hit the real numbers.
I'm jumping ahead, but these surveys are due March 17th.
Well, that's the other question. I mentioned bring it up.
We
Yeah.
gotta really.
Real crunch time wise.
So, get going.
Yeah, there's no, I was looking at, as I was going over your slides, I'm thinking, I'm doing the mental math, and I don't see it, I don't see it possible to put it off that long and get it done. It would have to be something we'd have to start like soon, next week, you know, in February, to be able to get enough of the information back. So we're kind of in a bind. I mean, at some level, we need to go to town meeting with the question, we want to go forward. At the same time, we got to go forward before we can ask the question.
Right.
No, I think right now, the only question is whether we want to participate in the survey.
Right.
Once the survey
Yeah.
results come back, then that business plan is put together, and then we determine whether we want to go forward with the whole being part of the process. So we can make that decision tonight, that we want to be part of the survey. And
Move forward with the survey.
go forward with the survey, and then it's down the road a month or 2 or 3 before,
Not too many months or 2 or 3.
well, they will then come back with a business plan to say this is feasible, and do we want in?
If we do that, then we're gonna have another town meeting, because that's gonna be way after our town meeting time.
Oh, right, for sure.
Unless a group is formed and you opt, and we opt in, and opt-in can happen just at the
That's-
select
yes,
board.
we
We
can
can
do
decide that as a
If
board.
somebody, is there anything, anybody in the offing?
Say that again?
Is there anybody on the cusp of starting one?
Is there I think where it's too early, right, to say that there's, right,
No,
right.
we need to decide
If
to
we do
make a resolution tonight, right, to get
Yes.
involved.
Yeah, survey.
Right, to undertake.
After you
the
get done with your, is this like the most important part of your presentation is what we're talking about now, or? do we need
Yeah,
some-
I mean, I'm almost done.
No, I was just curious. I mean,
I'm sorry, I kinda got off, I'm trying to think of all the little briefs.
This is basically all I know. I got a few more comments,
Right.
but I'm not gonna know, we'll know more after the survey meeting on the 6th.
So I think you're right, the main part of this presentation, from having been at the meeting, was we need to buy into the survey, and then a lot more information will be coming out, going
Yeah,
out.
I watched, I saw the tape.
Do we wanna take the first step in this, which is the survey, or not? And if so, we're gonna have to go fast.
Yes, ma'am.
I think the survey results would tell you if the town wanted to move forward, so it would be smart to do the survey to see how the town feels, and then
Sure,
you as the select board
absolutely.
can make the
Yeah,
decision.
that would give us a
based on
sense,
the
but
survey.
we'd still, by virtue of the nature of the structure, we'd have to go to a town meeting for the vote to move forward. But that would give us a sense of whether they want to go or not. Would we have to do that, take that to the voters before we get involved with the CUD? Not with somebody else's, but to start one of our own.
I don't think you have.
And as I read the slides, it said that you had to go to a town meeting to start the communications union district.
To join, once the union is defined,
Right.
then
Next
you
year.
either have to have a town meeting or,
Or join somebody else's,
Or the select.
or if what, yeah, or just like somebody
or
else.
join somebody else. I guess that's the thing.
But we don't need the town meeting.
If we can find somebody else to join.
No, either way.
Yeah.
If we want to join somebody else, or we want to be independent on our own district, so we have more control.
If we want to join another district, we're okay. If we want to start one,
We got a town vote.
then we have to have the town vote. That's the differentiation. I'm reading your slides, is that accurate?
That's right.
But the question is, if we want to start on one, do we then have more control over the district? Because as a town, we would control that versus if we join
Well,
somebody
you
else.
have two
then
towns in it.
No, it's always a group of towns. It's
Always a group.
Always a group
Oh,
of towns.
At least
And it has to be
Minimum
these
two.
two, so we'd have to
Right,
partner with.
and quite frankly, just to get the critical mass, it's never just two unless it was like Burlington.
Right.
Yeah.
The town would be expected to appoint somebody to the board of directors of whatever business entity is operating.
Sure. So we'd have a voice in there, but we'd still have, in order to start one, we can wait for somebody else to start one and then join them theoretically. Or we could move forward in this and with a clock ticking, because you're talking about July and,
Yeah, it ends July, or August 20th.
yeah.
2020.
That's when you have to commit,
That's
that's when it starts to happen?
when this survey ends.
Oh, okay,
After that,
right.
we don't know the schedule.
It could be the next,
Could be next
Town
year.
meeting.
Yeah.
Sure.
that's what my take on it.
At some time after that, there will be a communication union district formed. Somebody will invest, and then we'll know, what the real schedule is.
So,
Right. Well, if we opted to pursue this tonight, we can get out of it anytime, couldn't we? If the town wasn't like on board with.
It sounds like
the
this.
surveys came
The
back, and
survey-
you couldn't get 30%.
But I mean, just us,
This is no commitment.
This is
Right.
only.
This is only just do a survey.
Right.
that's what it
We're
sounded
not
like most
forced
of the
to
meeting
join
was
the
about.
union.
So, we do the, right, if we vote to do the survey, that's all we.
Okay.
Right.
Is there a reason why it is such a short period of time that they have decided on getting the survey done?
Yeah, well, Chris Campany was very apologetic for this,
Uh-huh.
but they're not allowed to start work until the grant's awarded, which was, I
A
guess.
couple of weeks ago.
And they have a
The
grant from the state.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so they've got to
State
start
legislature
because of the.
Would have been nice if they said this was coming.
Or given a few another
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
okay,
so-
that makes sense.
Can you explain the difference between, you said the August date, the August 20th date, and the March 17th date?
March 17th is when the survey is due.
Start. Oh, just-
After that.
So we have to send it out by then? Or we have to have?
No,
it
that's
back?
We have to have it back by.
Okay, and then they're gonna process them all. Someone's gonna take 4 months to process all that?
Yeah.
They're gonna take,
But process and formulate a business plan.
April, May, June.
I didn't get
Yeah,
that.
it's
I thought
about
this,
4
he was
months.
saying, he said at one point the survey ends.
Oh, by certain, he means the period during which that period which is the collection of the data, the analysis of the data, and the spitting out of the results.
Okay.
And
And then from there, there'll be a business plan on the 20th of August, or there'll be
No.
the data on the 20th of August that they will build the business plan off of.
It's
The
my
survey, here's the schedule. The surveys must be received by March 17th.
Okay.
The feasibility study will be completed by the end of April. Okay, so they're gonna digest the
Okay,
survey.
so about a month, okay, that's fine.
Then they'll develop a business plan for 2 or 3 months, following the Vermont Department of Public Service approval of their feasibility study. And all that's supposed to end by August of 2020.
So by August of 2020, there will
And that can lead
there will be
into
a
the-
plan, or at least a preliminary plan.
Yes.
Okay,
And so you have all the information you need in order to develop these districts.
got it.
Do they have any sense, the people who are honchoing this, that there are enough people, enough towns that want to go through with this?
I would say
Or
they
is
do.
it-
The
you think so?
kickoff meeting is extremely well attended.
Okay,
There was only 5 towns not represented.
oh, okay.
In Wyndham County.
So there's a lot of interest.
Oh, yes.
And that doesn't mean they weren't interested, they just no one there at that meeting.
Okay. That's true.
I'll just make a couple of points that are left. The WRC will provide an internet-based survey tool for people who respond on the internet if they want to, or they can respond in paper and we'll collect it. They're going back to the service they offer. They plan on offering several tiers of service, different levels of bandwidth, which you can change arbitrarily anytime you want. I raised the issue with Sue Westa, whether there'd be a plan oriented toward vacation homeowners where they could turn it on and off, or offer something like consumer cellular plan where you pay a connection charge, which isn't all that significant, and then it goes up from there by how much you use. She didn't know the answer.
I would think for this particular part of the state, that's a real important question.
Yes, it is, so I'll keep asking it.
And even families who really couldn't afford paying, let's say, a big amount of money.
There was some talk about providing for lower income people,
Uh-huh.
because it will become a very important source for school children.
Yeah,
So the question, that brings up another issue in my mind as I was reading those slides, my brain shifted. We're talking now about a combination of individual personal use and business, or is business going to be funded separately?
No, business can,
Buy into it, right?
buy into it too.
So a family is going to be paying the same rate as somebody who's got a business, online business next door.
But the family will have a lower, not necessarily the same amount of usage.
Consumption.
So it's going
So
to be
you can get one rate for 100 up, 100 down, you can get a lower rate for 25 up, 25 down. You
Oh.
can choose the bandwidth that you
All
want.
right. So it's flexible in those regards.
And it's also location neutral, which means wherever somebody lives, they would be paying the same geographical rate. Although if you live a mile off the road in a long driveway, you'd have to supply the connection for the driveway. So
If
it's
you,
on
if
your
there wasn't
property.
already a
If-
connection
right.
to your house.
Right.
Right.
One final point. The reason why this is fulfilling our infrastructure policy is we're trying to, the state and I guess the town is trying to attract remote workers. Working in a collaborative environment, especially if you're using large files like AutoCAD files, takes enormous amount of bandwidth. So we could make it very attractive for them to live out in the woods and hug their trees and be online.
We can't have water, at least we can have broadband. What is the mood of the award?
Well, are you done presenting, Chris?
Yes, that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, by the way, thank you very much for doing that for us. Thank you very, very much.
Good job.
Yes, yes.
I'll make a motion to,
I have a motion that's fairly well scripted.
Why don't you do
With
that?
the help of the planning commission for drafting this for me. I can pass it out to everybody.
Look at this. So we have one.
Everybody can read it in advance, or I will read it out loud. too. Here. And so you're not surprised, Chris, your name is mentioned in here as being our appointee.
All right. If you're well.
Yes.
So, okay.
You want to see when this motion is going to
He wrote it.
See what you bought into?
I move that the select board authorize Jamaica's participation in the Wyndham Regional Commission's broadband feasibility study, and that Chris Robbins be appointed to serve as the town's official designated representative to that project. This action does not constitute a commitment to participate in a communications union district or to expend any public funds except for the cost of distributing a survey questionnaire to each Jamaica property owner.
Well said.
I'll second.
I have a second. Do I have any further discussion on this well said and seconded motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It sounds unanimous. You pass.
Thank you, Chris.
for serving, sir. Chris? Yes, excellent. I'm really glad you're going to take this on because it's something you've been involved with and you really enjoy it. Yeah, I don't know why you enjoy it. We're going to talk about that.
I wrote that section of the town plan, so
You really know what's going on. Good, excellent. Very good, very good, very good. Any other questions for Chris? Comment, besides another thank you? You were involved with that too, I gather.
Tangentially.
Tangentially.
So, yeah.
Nice to have an occasional tangent. Okay, well, moving on then, thank you again. We were scheduled to have a meeting with the representative, Kelly Pajala, who is set about 7:30, but she said she's gonna be moving things to get here. So what we can do is cover some of the really kind of normal select board stuff until she gets here. Works for everybody? First item of business is the review of the overweight permit request. We have an overweight permit request from the Newport Sand and Gravel / Carroll Concrete out of Newport, New Hampshire. And we have the fee, and we have the appropriate paperwork. Motion to send this to our road commissioner.
So many motion.
Do I have a second? Reviewing it, by the way, we're talking about something that's been done before, and I forgot to mention that the liability, certificate of liability is in here as well. So all in favor of sending this to the road commissioner, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good, thank you very much. It carries. And the next item of business, we have on a yearly basis, if I remember correctly, a response to the Vermont AOT having to do, it's called Certificate of Highway Mileage. And what this is the forms and a package of things that have to be approved and signed by the select board, saying that our mileage is whatever our mileage happens to be. And right now, we got a state highway mileage of 14.6, or a total mileage, class 1, 2, 3, and the statewide is 64.135 miles, and the legal trails of 19.6 miles. We need to just sign this, and because nothing's changed since last year. And this is the information from which we get state monies for our roads, that sort of stuff. So there's plenty of places for us to sign, so it's kind of small. We can get this done tonight. As I said, there's not been a whole lot of changes at all. I think I just read you the numbers, and as near as I can tell, there's a section here for new highways discontinued, reclassified, it's all blank, because we haven't done anything yet. So we're ready to go there. So, motion to have the select board sign these?
So moved.
I move, have a second?
Second.
I have a second, any further discussion? Am I making it clear what we're doing on?
Yeah.
What about that new project that we added to that, obviously, if they decide?
If we go through that, yeah, then we'll make the changes, but we're still waiting for the legal paperwork to be done. Yep. Okay, so all in favor, any further discussion?
That's part of us abiding by the Orange Book. What's the real name of that book? Is that something to do with that?
Well, the Orange Book tells us how to maintain all this stuff.
Right.
Yeah, this is
To be
just how,
eligible for those monies?
well, if we follow the Orange Book with this stuff, then we're
With
in
those-
compliance. But this, we have to tell them how many miles, so they know how much money to send us.
Which is part of that.
Yeah, it's all intertwined beyond my ken, so. That sounded good the last time when we were talking about with FEMA to make sure we're all lined up for money. And by doing these things on a regular basis, everybody seems happy.
Well, and we get funds,
That makes us happier.
Yes, makes us much happier.
hence the tax.
Somebody did ask, just as I'm stalling for Kelly, somebody did ask what our miles we had. We have, not including the state miles, we've got about 49, just under 50 miles of class 3 and class 2 roads that our guys are maintaining, the road crews maintaining. And then there's 14.6 is the state highway. So, and we've got 19, less under 20 miles of legal trail, which we don't maintain, but we walk on. Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any approve, it's after aye. All in favor, all against the nays. I don't know if you guys can tell, my eyes are pointed this way, but my ear is pointed this way. Because Kelly's, all right. So let's move on with that. Oh, all in favor say aye, we said that, all right, everybody vote? My ears weren't here. Okay, thank you. All right, the next item we have on the business is the warning for the town March meeting. Now, the warning has been circulated. What this basically is telling us what's going to happen, as you all know, for the March meeting. You all have got a copy of that now, or you've had a chance to review it? Anybody has not had a chance to review the town meeting warning?
This is the one that I had that is missing.
Yeah, that's the one.
Oh, okay, so you fixed it.
Yeah.
So, sorry, let's just read it
You
to
can
get
see
two things
what's
done.
here.
Make sure everybody's on the same page and I'm not a dancer, but I'm tapping. I know Kelly's gonna come through that door in a second. All right, the legal voters of the town of Jamaica in the county of Wyndham in the state of Vermont are hereby notified and warned to meet at 10 a.m. at the town hall in said town of Jamaica on the first Tuesday of March 3rd, 2020, to transact the following business and act upon the following articles. Number one, Article 1, To elect a moderator for a term of 1 year. Article 2, to act on the town report. Article 3, to elect the following officers as required by law. We have a select person for a term of 3 years by ballot, select person for a term of 1, actually 2 select people for terms of 1 year each. We have a lister for a term of 3 years by ballot. The first constable and the second constable each have a term of 1 year. Town grand juror for a term of a year. Town agent for 1 year. Trustee of public funds for a year. Agent to deed land for a year. Library trustee for a term of 5 years. School director for the West River Modified Union Education District for 1 year of a 3-year term. And the school director for the West River Modified Union Education District for a 3-year term. Understand that these 2 positions are being folded into this warning for the town because there is not going to be a school meeting on that day. And this is the first year we haven't had a school meeting. So we had to bring these into this particular warning. Article 4 is to see what sum of money the voters will vote to pay the town's running expenses and how it will be collected. Article 5, to see if the voters will authorize the select board to borrow money in anticipation of taxes. Article 6, shall the voters authorize the select board to spend, quote, unanticipated funds such as grants, gifts, and/or interest, unquote. Article 7, to set the time for the opening of the next annual town meeting to be held on the first Tuesday in March 2021. And the things that were changed are the ones that needed to be fixed. Article 8, to transact any other business that may legally come before the meeting. And then Article 9, to adjourn. And then there's signatures for all of us and Sarah. Any questions about the town warning at this point?
I'll make a motion to pass the town warning as written.
Second.
Second, do you have any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the warning is accepted and we will pass it around to be signed along with the certificate of highway mileage. And what I'll do here, make it easy, I'll put the part that's got to be signed at the top.
I'll talk about my technology.
Yes, there's the item that Tom brought up was the technology.
We're trying to upgrade the computers, Lister's, 2 Lister's computers, Sarah's computer and Terry's computer to Windows 10. I think I can get that done for free, but I was looking at their computers and the version of Office on them is Office 2010, which is 10 years old. So I'm asking the board, I mean, if we want to invest money in upgrading the software, I would recommend doing that. It makes sense to keep it current. We'll probably have to switch over from a license-based model to a subscription-based model, which means there'll be ongoing costs. But generally, when you calculate it, if you got a new operating system every 3 years, it breaks even pretty much. We will get government rates, so I think it's $3 a month per person, so about $36. That's when I'm guessing that. I have to check on that, $3 or $4 a month. So, you know, it's about $50 a year per computer.
I upgraded mine today.
Good for you.
10 for $110.
Okay.
So
Good.
that's what.
And we may have to do that too. I have to look at the licensing on these Windows 7s. We may be able to do that.
Will that be like per computer?
Per
So
computer.
for the listers as well?
So if we did all computer, yeah, so we're looking at, yeah, so.
6.
Well, if they need Office, yes, so it'd be 4 computers.
Oh,
And I don't know what Louis uses.
Oh,
and
yeah,
whatever
because
he
you got his
uses as
own
well,
one.
yeah, so.
we should find
6
out.
computers, so, I mean, it could be $1,000, all told, if we, you know,
Yeah,
if we
$1,000
get an operating system, we have to pay for that, if we're getting Office. And then again, that's as long as we have those licenses, it's a subscription model now, so you're gonna pay every year.
Every year.
Yeah, and usually we do a year. I would do a year subscription rather than monthly, because it's a little bit cheaper.
I think so.
Well, can we, if Tom's willing, are you?
I'll do the work. I'll do the work, but
I could get the money out of, we have money budgeted for
Yeah.
regular stuff,
Yeah.
regular expenses.
I think that's a good idea. I hate to say, I had to go ahead and do mine as well, but the reality of the world is catching up to us.
well, Windows 7 end of life last week, so there's no more support on that, no more security updates, so we're a little bit behind on that. Windows 10,
You don't know what's going to happen.
that's really old. So I would guess that end of life is a little longer.
Well, let's differentiate, because I got confused. We're not talking Windows 10, we're
Not
talking.
Windows 10, Office 10.
Office 10.
2010 versus
Office 2010.
Yeah,
As opposed
what
to
we would do
Windows
is now is go into Office 365, which is the subscription-based model, which basically then download the software, and then it updates, and it keeps updating, and so you always have the newest, if you want to, you can always have the newest, latest and greatest software. If you don't, you can let it sit and, you know,
But
sit back.
understand that these are two separate items, we're still
Yes.
talking about going from Windows 10 to Windows 7 to Windows 10.
I will get the Windows 10 done. I'm working with Sarah, and I was looking at the computers before the meeting tonight, so I will get moving on that. At least get that done, and then the office would be something separate.
All right. Yeah. Can you get a sense of what it would cost us? Like, is there a way to find out?
I can, well, yeah, I will determine all those funds, but I would say if we allocate $1,000, I probably wouldn't have to exceed
Coming
that.
into that.
Yes, so.
Yeah, I would like to entertain a motion, that's a good idea.
I will second it.
No, I can't, I would.
Oh, I move that we allocate $1,000 for the upgrade of our computer system here at the
The
town.
desktop computers.
Yes.
There's not,
that's-
this is, oh, what? Do I have a second?
Second.
A second, further discussion. Will that interfere with NEMRC or any other kinds of things?
That's what I have to determine. That's why I didn't just go, well, let's upgrade. So, yeah, I'll work with them, I'll work with NEMRC, I'll work with ArcGIS and make sure that the software versions we have are compatible with Windows 10.
Yeah, because.
I believe, well, NEMRC runs off the servers, but the ArcGIS seems to be a newer version of it, so probably does work on it. But we have to do something, and I should talk to Terry and find out if there's any special software. We kind of go through her computer. There's so much stuff on there, but my guess is she doesn't know what any.
Well, luckily, you guys have people you can turn to.
Right. Yeah, so we're working on it. And I started the conversation a couple weeks ago and sort of got
Just-
put aside, and now I'm back on it.
Just for the television audience, NEMRC is the software system that we use for our financial management and a lot of other stuff.
Right.
That's built into our servers and computers.
And the ArcGIS is a ARC software, if you know what that is, geo-mapping, basically.
Okay.
Software,
Yeah, that's
which is pretty important, listers and such.
So I've got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? None. So that carries.
I will work with you then if
Yeah.
I need to buy anything.
Sure, yeah, we can make that work without a
Because
problem.
again, we're government, so we should get
Sure.
best, government, nonprofit.
My thinking is we gotta get ready to go into the future, especially if we're talking about bringing in some hot.
Right.
Well,
Well, I
decent
think,
amount of-
the biggest concern is security.
Yeah.
I mean, and
Yeah.
if your system, if your software and your operating systems fall behind,
Sure.
they don't do security patches anymore, the vulnerabilities, whatever vulnerabilities are there are left open, and we don't want to expose ourselves to that risk, so.
That makes sense to me. All right, I've got Corey. Can I recommend like a 10-minute break and give Kelly some time to get here before we give up on her?
Should we do public concerns?
Oh, public concerns. Oh, I'm sorry. We have a public
So
concern?
you do that.
No public concerns? Let's take a, take a minute.
It doesn't have to be formal, just
Okay.
one quick question. In connection with other goals of the energy plan, is supporting electric vehicles. So through a different route, through a family member, I learned that the state of Vermont is actually commissioning right now. They've sent out RFPs to a variety of firms that do the, and if anybody's aware of this, or I'm saying something everybody knows already, just stop me. But they're seeking RFPs from companies that install and maintain superchargers. Not through Tesla, which does it for free if they like your stuff. It turns out in that formal RFP from the state, there are a number of towns that are listed or locations that are listed as kind of ideal locations, so that when the proposal comes back, it's sensitive to where the state is likely to want superchargers, and Jamaica is one of them, which would be, I think, great on a variety of levels, but definitely it really serves to give us some accomplishments under our energy, forward-looking energy plan. So it's really just a discussion item. I wanted to see if anybody was aware of it and if there's an interest in us kind of pursuing what the state is thinking, and if there's any way we can kind of help them, pick Jamaica to do that.
Wasn't there a grant we applied for last year that we didn't?
We actually didn't, we never presented the application. There was actually a fair amount of legwork required to do site analysis and all that kind of stuff. And if there any fault, I think it was notified through part on my part. I think because Rebecca put that forward to me.
It was Volkswagen settlement money that
Right.
the state
Oh,
was
that's right.
distributing in order to
There was a
get
second
towns to
chance
fund.
to apply,
Right,
which I don't think
and
has happened yet.
I had passed that along to Greg to look into it.
Right.
There's also USDA money available for this.
What I became aware of is separate from, as I understand, I'm not an expert, but is separate from that. And there's different funding, a combination of federal and state funding, not from a private lawsuit or some other private funds. So it's really just to kind of maybe resuscitate this
Share
examination.
that information if you have
Yeah,
contact with
I will.
Select Board and Planning Commission?
Sure.
Yeah.
I discussed it with the planning commission.
Okay, yeah.
But that was
And I will go dig up that other application because I think there was a second
wave.
wave of, grants.
Yeah, that was the very first round.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Would, I guess a question for Joel serves on the Transportation Committee for Wyndham Regional. Would that be something that would come up?
No, it came up in the Community Development Committee meeting.
But I'm just saying, and I'm on that committee too, when I
Yeah.
make it down there, that kind of thing doesn't show up in our scope of
Well, it could be brought
There-
up. It could be brought up,
because Wyndham Regional is, huge on.
right.
Electric.
Right,
Yeah.
but the person from USDA did say that there was funding available for that sort of thing, and their funding is not contingent on any other funding, and any other funding will not eliminate its use, and they'll even help coordinate the funding.
Thank you.
I can update a little bit on the town hall.
Oh, sure.
Right now, two things are happening at the same time. Stuart Barker is working on the water by doing underground stuff. And the ceiling is supposed to be started like in 2 days.
Oh, that's fine.
Right. So, and I hope this is a good time.
Yeah, I don't believe there's any
What's going
events
on.
until March. We just had the Martin Luther King event. The water pipes were not frozen for that like last year, so we managed to pull that off. So that was a good turnout for
I
that.
checked the other day to see, because it was brutal, it was like 7 degrees, and I thought, oh,
Yeah,
boy.
it survived, so whatever Stuart's doing, he's doing it right, so if he's done anything, so yeah, it's been good.
We do have two events at the end of February.
We
We
have
have
the
something
town
going
meeting
here.
too.
Yeah, the
Oh,
town
then we have the
meeting.
town meeting too, yeah.
Our event's not
And I
up
think
until
Wyndham
after.
Regional has an
I don't
event in
think
there.
that
February
either.
20th?
Is that one? No, that's something different.
There's
That's,
another meeting.
West River, it's a new group.
Is that the mountain biking thing?
Well, I have
No, It's a
alerted,
regional meeting, I think they select, there's two locations,
Yeah, but it's-
Jamaica and
it's
somewhere
not-
else. But it's late February.
It's not Wyndham Regional.
yeah,
though.
I have
No, okay.
alerted the two contractors that if there is something coming in, I'll alert them and they can move their stuff to the
Okay,
side.
they're both within like the last few days of February. It's like
Okay.
Wednesday,
You know, I think they
Thursday or
should be
Friday is
finished
the other
by
event.
When are the scouts wanting?
They had originally said Friday, but then they asked if Thursday was available, so I'm not really sure which.
Thursday, Friday,
One of
what?
those 2 dates, the
Oh,
Cub
for
Scouts
when?
needed.
Which Thursday, Friday?
That end of February. They're
End
one
of
of those two.
February. Oh, they're
events.
those,
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty then.
Thank you.
You want to just take I'll give her till 8?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can sign things, okay.
Yeah,
Just-
everybody can go clean my office.
You did. Let's take a 10-minute
Clean break.
cleaning break, and we'll reconvene at 8 o'clock. It's close enough to 8 o'clock, let's reconvene. We have a guest arrived, Representative Kelly Pajala. Thank you for coming. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Well, I'm sorry that I didn't get you before the session started, but Monday nights are a busy night for almost all of the towns in the district. And I'm here tonight specifically because I've been, so even though you don't see my face, I'm always listening to what's going on. And your tax rate issue came to my attention, so I'm here partially because of that. And I figured you probably had some questions for me, so I'm here to be available to you as well. And I can either start with your questions, or I can start with what I know so far about your tax rate.
That's probably where our questions are going to come.
What do you know about our tax rate?
Yeah, there's a
How do we get them lowered?
Well, the unfortunate, easy answer to that, and though it's not really an easy answer, is the budget will have to be lowered for your rate to be lowered. The mechanism that is making your rate jump so much higher than all of the other towns in your school district has to do with you hitting a target tax rate last year that made you ineligible for the 5% cap on the increase in your rate, which I think probably no one would have even been thinking about. And it really has to do with where you are starting from versus where the other towns are starting from and the amount that your rate's changing. And I haven't seen your local numbers yet, so I don't know what your CLA is gonna do to your rate, but I know it's pretty close to 100. I don't know exactly what it is, but because you had just had a townwide reappraisal in the recent past. But so the mechanism that's driving your rate up so high is that not being eligible for that 5% cap.
So that's something the school board should have seen and gone, oh, we shouldn't go above this level, else we're gonna take a huge tax hit? Or is it something?
I don't know that it's something that they
don't know.
would have been looking out for.
Okay.
Because it would have been something that they would have had to have been looking out for last year. Because
Okay.
it's really based on what happened last year versus what's about to happen this year. And it's based on the amount that you're increasing, so it's not necessarily, it has nothing to do with just the students that are in Jamaica. The students in the district overall went down, so that drives up your per pupil spending, so that affects everybody, but it's really about where you were starting from and where you're going to, and it's not, just because Jamaica's student count is lower,
I watched that meeting, and they kept coming back, unless I forgot, I heard, they weren't really saying it was all the CLA or that, they kept saying it was this formula, and no one knew what the formula was.
Yeah, it's not the CLA part of the formula.
Right, but no one knew.
Right, the CLA hasn't really been applied as of yet, because you actually don't have a finalized budget yet. So they haven't factored that in. It's so convoluted. It has to do with the state set a target tax rate that they said if you get to this rate, this is like, don't go above this rate essentially. And if you do, you will no longer be eligible for the 5% rate increase. That's one of the things that they were touting as a benefit to the consolidations, that your rate wouldn't go up more than 5% as a result of having consolidated your school district, except if you've already hit this target tax rate and then you go above it. So in Jamaica's case, you were dangerously close to that rate last year, and so this year you're going above it.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Partly for me, because I don't understand a lick of what you just said. And partly for, I am sure there's at least another person on the other side of that camera who's sitting in the same boat I am. Would you use like whole sentences? What rate are you talking about that we missed the cap for, or however that works? Understand that right now we're looking at our municipal tax rate increase for the next fiscal year is 0.7.
Right, and your education rate is
19.2.
Yeah, somewhere
It was 3 something.
18, 19, right.
That's patently absurd
Yeah.
from the perspective of those of us who are shelling it out. So what
Right.
is it we didn't do last year that makes us now suffer?
Well, at this point, it wasn't you. You're a part of a consolidated school district
Yeah.
now, so, it was the school district.
If the school district didn't reach the cap, then why is the town of Jamaica paying for 19% and other towns aren't?
It's because of where Jamaica started and where you are going to,
We started,
where your rate was and where your rate is now going to. And the other towns' rates were not at the same place Jamaica's
okay,
rate
let's go a whole
was.
sentence now. What rate are you talking about?
Your education tax.
My education tax rate for last year was lower than others.
I'm not sure if they were lower than others or not, because I didn't look at all of the other towns. But it's not so much in comparison to the other towns, it's in comparison to this target tax rate that the state has said they want you to not go beyond. So it's not, you can't necessarily compare it to the other towns in the district.
Okay, so let's go back to last year. There's a rate up beyond which we were not supposed to go beyond that rate. We were not supposed to exceed some arbitrary rate of X.
Yes,
We went above it or we stayed below it?
I believe you were a hair below it.
So because
last
we
year.
stayed a hair below last year, we are now going to go up 19%.
It's not so much that cause and effect isn't quite right. So you were a hair below it last year, so you hadn't hit it. But based on the increase in your rate because of the school budget this year, that budget increase is pushing you above it.
So their budget increase is now going to push us up because we stayed under budget last year. Now their budget is going to push us up 19%.
In a nutshell.
Because of our town, our assessment, is that have anything to do with that? I didn't think so.
No.
No.
Does it have any?
That's why I don't understand.
And the CLA thing that you started out with saying sort of is often.
Right, the CLA is,
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Does it have
Excuse
anything
of the
to do with the number of students that we have?
it has something to do with the number of students in the entire district.
Not just the 30
Not just,
that we have?
not just Jamaica. Enrollment in the district went down overall, but it's not happening specifically because of the number of Jamaica students.
And is it not cost per, is it cost per pupil that's, we've exceeded that rate, or it's the tax rate that we've exceeded?
Well, you get to the tax rate based on what your cost
Okay,
per
so if they-
pupil
Right,
is.
So-
So the fact that your cost per pupil goes up
right.
because your student count goes down is one of the steps that gets you to the higher tax rate.
Yeah,
Does that make
because-
sense?
Part of what happened to us is that our 6th grade, or is it the 5th grade, is now not even in our school. Or is it
It's all in the
fifth
same
grade?
district.
That's all
But
within the
makes
same
no
district, so,
difference?
no.
Okay.
One quick thing I'd like to insert, just to make the, to be fair. You are a brave woman. Even though it sounds like we're attacking you, we really are attacking
No,
you.
no, I don't feel attacked,
We're not done
this is very, it's complicated, I mean, I'm,
It is complicated.
Let me,
I can speak to it in very general terms,
Yeah.
but if someone, sat me down with all the numbers, it's maddening.
yeah.
Um,
Well, speaking of all the numbers, 2 weeks ago, when did I send that letter?
Which letter?
The letter to the school district.
A couple, yeah.
A couple of weeks ago, I wrote a letter
Right after that.
to the, what's it called?
Supervisory union.
Supervisor union.
Oh, to the supervisory union.
Yeah, I'm asking them to share with us, which is public information, the salaries of the people, overhead as well as the teachers. Because we can absorb fairly large amounts, but when you start talking 19%, when you're talking about people who are already spending an awful lot of money on taxes, most of the huge portion of which goes to the school anyhow, and we're not seeing the results. And I don't see what we're paying the overhead. Having been in education a number of times in my life, I got a sense of how that works. And I'm not entirely sure and I'm guessing most of the people that I've talked to aren't terribly sure, that our money is being spent wisely enough for them to be able to impose a 19% increase arbitrarily and without any input from the community. Does that make sense? Not shooting at you, because
Yeah, no,
you're very nice for showing up.
No, that's.
Well, we get to
That
vote.
budget hasn't
You do, right,
That's
you
it.
do get to vote on the budget.
Until we voted in.
They did rescind the
Yes.
vote to pass the budget, so
Yes.
that they can try to work on the budget,
Yes.
but
Well, to finish my statement,
Yes.
I've heard nothing back, it's been 2 weeks.
from the supervisor.
Exactly, nothing. No phone calls, no letters, no messages, no, snowballs thrown at my front door, no response at all. So my concern is that, yes, we can, again, I have a little bit of education in this, we can negate the budget. That doesn't do anything unless it changes afterwards. Historically, we've said no to a budget, and then we come back with a budget that's off by 15 cents, and we're supposed to be happy about that. This is a serious amount of money.
Yes.
Yeah.
I bet you if you look at that budget, it probably is pretty reasonable. The problem we're facing is a system that was designed to operate linearly for a much larger number of students than we have.
Good point.
Now what we have is this endless stream of factors and coefficients,
Yes.
which at the end you divide by the number of students. So it's basically proportional to the function of 1 divided by n. And when n gets small, the percent increase goes to the
way
roof.
up.
And that's what.
So that's-
Now, so I'm gonna say one more thing.
Okay.
I understand that there are people from Wyndham and other towns that are going to the education agency and complaining loudly about the effects of this. And I think we ought to do it too.
Yeah, I'm gonna segue off of that
Okay.
comment. So yes, Wyndham is doing that, as is Dover and Wilmington and, Reedboro and there are more. Yeah, and that's all based on the weighting study that just was released in December. So last year, they finally, budgeted for doing a really comprehensive look at how they weight students and get to that per pupil spending number. So essentially, this is gonna be a huge oversimplification, but a perfect student who doesn't have any challenges in one way or another and is in elementary school counts as 1. A pre-K student counts as 0.46 of a student. A high school student is 1.13, I think. And then there are additional upward weights if you are a low-income student or an English as a second language learner student. And so they looked at the way we've been weighting our students and counting our students and found it to be grossly incorrect, I will say. And the biggest discrepancy appears to be the weight for students in poverty. That weight ought to have been closer to 3. So this group of people, and there are some other new weights that they're talking about, like geographic challenges and population density, and things that we know add to the cost of educating students, because you still have to educate them and give them a good education, but there are fewer of them. So this study came out in December. It's pretty clear that the way we've been doing education finances has been really detrimental to rural communities, and in particular poor rural communities. And so there are a couple of bills that I have signed on to that one demands a look back at what this, who have been the winners and losers, given that we now know that this equation has been off. One is a moratorium on doing anything with education finance until this issue is looked at and acted on. And one is to enact these new rates that have now been determined to be more accurate. It also appears that the weights that were given were not done with any research. They were mostly arbitrary. And they've been in place for about 20 years.
Will that affect this year's tax rates though?
Well, it would mean they would have to take up those bills and act on them.
Yes.
So not likely.
Okay.
But there is certainly going to be a push for them to be taken up. And in absence of that, there will probably be some other steps taken. I believe it will be taken up eventually. I think that there isn't really a choice in the matter. If there's a lawsuit, I think it will be found to be unconstitutional the way that it's currently being done. It's certainly an injustice to a lot of communities in the state. And I do believe that Jamaica is on the list of towns who would see a substantial change in their tax rate if these new weights were enacted. Substantial in a direction that would probably make everybody breathe a sigh of relief.
I mean, our taxes have suffered since Act 60 was passed,
Yes.
back in 2000. It increased exponentially.
Yes.
It's crazy. Just a quick question. You mentioned a lot of other towns in Wynn County. Statewide, are other towns, have we heard of other towns experiencing this sort of 20% increases, or is it just localized to, Northeast Kingdom and Southern Vermont and rural areas?
I haven't looked at the list of everybody to know where everyone's percentages are right now.
So if this examination is taking place, but it doesn't come in time for our tax bill to be paid, which is October 1, we end up paying the 19 point whatever percent.
Unless there are cuts,
Budget.
in the school district budget.
We're
So
gonna get a chance
what's
to
the
vote on the budget.
chance? What's the chance that it will be looked at? Slim?
Well, there's a bunch of us who are gonna try really hard to get it taken up this year. One of the reasons people are not taking it up immediately, even though it seems like it should be something that's taken up immediately, is that this is the second year of the biennium and we just don't have time, which is just inexcusable, I think.
There's another word for that.
Good question. It's a little bit, I think it's on target, but it may seem a little off to start with. Is Jamaica a town that gives or receives in this giving-receiving kind of formula?
Yeah.
We give money away.
Because you're above the excess spending
In theory.
threshold.
So here's the bigger picture I would ask you.
Right, so you're giving and you're being hurt at the same time.
Exactly.
Yes.
We can figure that part out. So here's the bigger picture. We in Jamaica have incurred a serious economic downturn with the, let's say, the localization of resources to Stratton. When Stratton was being built in the early years, we had restaurants, we had hotels, we had an infrastructure that was not completely based, but a big chunk of it came from Stratton.
Right.
Now we're a pass-through community. We're losing our restaurants. We have the hotels, they're just, we don't have the structure. We've got one left, we're losing one, we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the community economic viability that we once had, simply because Stratton did a very, very good job of attracting people and then keeping them up there. And I suspect we're not the only community in that boat. So the concept of giving versus receiving towns, that seems to me, it goes back, I don't know, 20 years maybe longer, I don't know, it's been a long time, seems to need to be revised another real good look at it. Because I don't think we're in the same situation we were. And if we're still using a formula that was predicated on us getting the largesse from a large tax, not a large economic draw isn't there anymore. And so as we struggle to maintain a community and a viable economic structure within that community, we're hurt by their success. And let's face it, we're advantaged to their success because our second homeowners, and there's a lot we get from Stratton. I'm not knocking that at all. It's just the formula that says we are now giving to smaller communities. We've got 30 or 35 kids. We have drive-through businesses, traffic, and we're getting
It's even a lot more,
Tight.
it's even a lot more general than that, even without Stratton in the equation. I mean, rural communities are declining economically and, you know, quality of life and all these other reasons people are moving out. And then at the same time, the tax rate for schools are going up, so it's gonna really even just confirm the fact that these families and everybody wants to move out. I mean, it's like, it's just kind of hitting it harder. And, you know, the state's desire to maintain the economies in the rural sense of these smaller towns is just even, you can't, I mean, this is not helping obviously at all, and really impacting, making it so much worse.
It does seem an awful lot like one hand does not understand what the other hand is doing up there. I'm sorry.
Back to the budget. I'm gonna ask, I would say, I don't believe, I mean, this isn't my personal opinion, but it's like the Jamaica school getting like pushed to close. I mean, is the supervisor unit, whatever they call that, would it be better? I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not for or against it. Geez, I'm gonna get myself in trouble, but no, what people I'm hearing on like the street is, you know, that budget, we're sort of like being forced to look at closing the school. Nobody's saying that, you know, at the meetings or anything, but there's like this elephant in the room. You know, it's a hard question to ask. So would they consciously do that? And, you know,
Well, it's really a question for the school board.
well, that's what I mean. That's what I'm saying. I'm not asking.
That's right, that's-
Ultimately, the town.
We don't even
They
have
get
a
to
school
vote on that.
board.
Yeah, we
Well,
don't.
the board of the district.
Well, that's what I'm at. That's what I want to say, that I feel is sort of happening, is that, you know, to hell with Jamaica, that board, but that's what I kind of feel like watching, because I'm not
I feel that
answering
same way.
any questions, but.
I think
Like
my
you're a
union's
problem.
charter says you can't close.
You can't close without the town voting.
Oh, I know.
But if your tax rates are gonna go up 30%,
Wow.
25%, then you're gonna
And
say,
another
let's
question.
close your school.
Yeah.
But will that matter? If the formula is the fewer number of people, the more money, when we're down to zero, we're gonna be really paying.
Right. But if-
That's the way one over end works.
Exactly.
Well, just one other thing. What are the chances, is this just 1 year? Say we tried to pay the 19%. Are we looking at that again next year?
Depends on, A, it depends on the school budget, and B, it depends on what we do in Montpelier. I mean, I do think that Jamaica would be positively impacted by the changing of how they weight students.
So, are there any pressure points beside you that?
Your senators?
They're busy.
That doesn't matter.
I know.
Everybody's busy.
I'm being
They said there also
sarcastic.
those school board meetings, and they said at the school board meeting that it costs about $400,000 to run our entire school. We get a $91,000 small school grants, which they would lose if they closed it. So that's just a little tiny piece of the
Right.
budget. So I don't think closing Jamaica is gonna do anything for our budget, from what the board is saying.
That's what they're saying.
Right, from what they're saying, but you know, if our school's only 400,000, the total budget is how many million? I mean, that's a very small percentage, so if they close Jamaica, they save 400,000, they lose the small school grant, so are they really gonna do anything with that money? So I don't think that is the biggest concern, I think the biggest concern is the budget.
Well, and one concern that I have is, and something that townspeople have talked to me about is we're getting less. You know, they cut the principal's time at the school, and we're paying so much more.
That's
What are we
right.
getting for 20%? And, you know, if we're not getting anything, what's the justification that gets back to these formulas? So, that's, you know, that's not right.
Well, now that we've solved that problem.
Yeah, we have
I just want the town to know that I'm somewhat aware of, the feelings that some people have that, keep raising Jamaica's taxes. What'll be is it'll be what it'll be, but, Sarah makes a good point that.
Decisions are made intentionally thinking that their goal is to raise Jamaica's taxes.
No, I understand that, but sure, they couldn't answer any questions at that meeting about.
What is, and you may not be able to answer this question. What is your opinion of what we should do?
Hound your school district board members. Talk to the people on the school district board and
But we have one representative,
on the.
Yeah.
because we have a
Well,
vacant
and
seat. And he wants-
he's pretty motivated.
He is pretty motivated, but it's one vote of 6 or 7, it's like, we don't have a lot of say,
We don't.
which was a concern I was having when Act 46 came in, that we wouldn't have any say in the board, because we're a small town.
Two, really,
Oh, Jennifer, I'm sorry, my
Jennifer.
Well, and
the clerk,
Technically, the
right?
The
We did
school
appoint
district
this.
board is supposed to be making decisions for the entire district, not.
One would argue it's different.
So what if we pulled out
I think
and
it's-
went on our
Ship
own?
has sailed, I think.
That ship is sailed, we can't do that.
With the way the last vote that we did recently, in order to get out of it, everybody else had to
Everyone
vote
would-
us out of it. It's
Oh,
just
yeah,
one of
that's
those
right.
things,
Yeah. Right.
Thank you.
But I would encourage you all to contact your senators about the weighting study, because that is going to take
What,
some.
could you spell that? What?
W-E-I-G-H-E.
Yes,
Weight.
yes,
How much weight they put on each sheet.
Oh,
because it will definitely need to apply some
Weighting.
pressure.
No, this is in case, for the, again, because that was confusing, the weighting study is how each student is weighed in the formula. And when you're talking about one student, and then it's a student and a half if they have a special needs or whatever. So it's the weight of a particular body in the system. Little kids are like, what'd you say, 3/4 or something? 5.
0.46.
0.46.
Yeah, they're not even a half.
And so that's what, when you said weighting system, we're not talking about just waiting for them to do more damage to us. We're talking about the weight of the individual student. Yeah.
We have almost 50% of our student body of the 30 who can't afford lunch.
Which is why I think the change in the weights of the students would actually have a positive impact, because they, especially given that the biggest change would be to the weight of kids in poverty, those students one child would be counted as 3 children, which brings the number of pupils in the
Higher
formula
than
higher,
30.
which brings your rate down.
Yeah, because that's a big deal right now.
Yes. Agreed.
Well, aren't you glad you came?
I am.
We're
No,
glad
I
you
know,
came.
like I said, even though you don't see my face, I am always listening, and when this came up, I was like, oh, yeah.
It was
Is there
good
any other-
thinking on your part.
Are there any other issues or any other initiatives in the body that are going on right now that you can talk about? Just briefly.
There's a lot of them. Act 250 is getting a lot of attention.
Okay.
We'll see where some of that gets to. There's a lot of negotiating going on. Some of the really detrimental things that they were talking about doing have shifted a little bit, so that gives me a little bit of hope that rural communities aren't going to be, not able to do any sort of development.
It's a little loosening up. Is that what
I
you're experiencing?
think streamlining is, they're trying to create some more uniform systems so that the process is a little bit more uniform and the law is applied a little bit more evenly across the state. There are definitely some pretty big discrepancies in different regions for how the process goes. But even things like changing the elevation at which development would automatically fall under Act 250. At one point, they talked about dropping it down to, I think it was 1,500, and it was like, how many towns in the state are their entire town would trigger it?
Yep.
Act 250. So there's been a lot of movement, and some of it has been helpful, and there's still a lot of negotiating going on. The tax and regulate bill is getting a lot of attention, and hopefully that will go somewhere. It's a little unclear as to how quickly that will materialize, but
One of the things that was on TV the other day was Governor Scott was talking about initiatives to make the state more attractive to some of the younger people, to bring them in. And it was about the same week that I just found out this the other day. I have a brother and a cousin who won't come to Vermont, although they're Vermonters and they really like Vermont. They're both retired, well, one's about to retire, one's retired military, because they can get tax-free in other states.
Oh, yeah, like New York State.
New York won't tax your military retirement.
Right.
So if you're trying to attract younger, skilled people, to me, of course, I'm prejudiced being military, but that's a whole cadre of folk.
that is an initiative actually to exempt military pensions.
Well, I guess the whole concept of how we attract.
Yeah. Whether it makes it across the finish line at this point, I can't say, but that is it.
I guess what I'm saying is it's that kind of, put us on, yeah. But it's that kind of initiative that will, I think, be productive in bringing in, we gotta have some younger families. We're desperately in need of getting some more blood in, especially in this town, because us old blood guys. The idea though is that would be a good idea, but that's again, looking forward. And I don't know if it's gonna offset a 19% tax, but at least we bring in kids, we bring in families, we bring in productive people with skills.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I lobby in favor of that.
Yeah. Well, that's on the table.
Not just the military piece, but the whole concept of how we attract. Yeah.
States do not.
Well, we've eaten up half an hour of your night.
Okay.
Any other questions? We want to cast any more aspersions at Montpelier through her?
Go for it.
That's the spirit. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we'll be here for a while.
Yeah, and
Unless we all advocate and run away.
I'm gonna keep tabs on what's happening with the school budget and
Okay,
if there's anything that can be done.
thank you.
Yeah.
United Funds, we're here
Yep.
every other Tuesday.
Yeah.
Every Monday, what did I say?
Will we see,
Mondays, everyone meets on Monday.
we'll see you at town meeting, maybe for a little
I am gonna try to make town meeting. I have to talk to my staff, I don't have staff for the legislature.
Right.
But, because it's the presidential primary,
Right.
it's a really, really busy election day.
Super
Um, Yeah, so I'm sure we'll come up with a plan, and I'm sure it'll be fine, but I haven't quite nailed down all of that yet.
Understand.
So it's one of those weird two-hat things that,
Sure.
this is, presidential primary is a big deal.
Right.
It is for them.
Well, it is for all of us.
Everybody.
Yeah, but
So-
I'll be in touch with you about it.
Thank you.
Thank
Can I
you.
get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second? Okay, thank you. Now we can talk, now we can
Yeah.
really tell you. Thank you.
Turn the cameras